International data transfers. It's a topic that really should be straightforward, but believe it or not, so many organizations are still getting the absolute fundamentals wrong. Okay, let's dive into this and uncover the common pitfalls that might just be hiding in your own processes.
Because look, this isn't just some abstract theoretical exercise. This is about what's actually happening under the hood of your business every single day. We're going to look at that huge gap between what's written on paper and what's really happening in practice.
So, let's kick things off with the most common traps. These are the assumptions that make privacy and security programs feel safe. But, well, they might actually be built on a pretty shaky foundation, like a house of cards.
And here is the first big one. Your team gets a vendor to sign those Standard Contractual Clauses, the SCCs. Phew! Everyone breathes this huge sigh of relief. Job done, right? We can all go home? Well, not quite.
You see, the big disconnect is right here. The assumption, what pretty much everyone thinks, is that getting those SCCs signed is the finish line. Check the box, we're compliant. But the reality, that signature, that's just the starting gun.
The real work, the stuff that actually matters, begins after the ink is dry. Are you doing a transfer impact assessment that actually looks at the context of the transfer? Do you really know where your vendors are, those onward transfers? And are you actively keeping an eye on the surveillance laws in those countries? This is the hard stuff, the operational follow-through that separates real compliance from just shuffling paper.
Okay, on to trap number 2. You're working with a country that has really strong data localization laws, so you make sure your data is stored on local servers. Great. That means there's no international transfer happening, correct? Let's challenge that idea for a second.
So, here's the crucial point. Storing data locally does not mean it's processed locally. Think about it. If a support team from another country can access that server, guess what? That's a transfer. If your analytics team runs reports from an office offshore, that's a transfer. Even something as simple as mirroring backups to a server in another region for disaster recovery, yep, that counts too. This is what we call the localization illusion.
And all of this really points to a much bigger problem. You might have all the right clauses in your contract, a signed DPA, a promise of local storage, but without checking that it's actually happening, that contract can create a really dangerous false sense of security.
And this quote just illustrates the point brilliantly. A contract, it might feel comfortable, right? Like a pillow. But when things go wrong, when there's a breach or a regulator comes knocking, you don't need a pillow. You need a parachute. You need operational controls that actually work, not just a piece of paper.
Now, this brings us to what might be the biggest threat of all, and it's one that a lot of privacy programs completely miss: the shadow transfers. We're talking about the data flows happening completely outside of your official, approved processes.
It's true in security, and it's absolutely true in privacy. The transfers you've documented and assessed, that's one thing. But the ones you don't even know are happening, that is where the real danger is hiding.
Let's just think about how this plays out in the tools you use every single day. That super handy Slack plugin your marketing team just installed? That new CRM integration for the sales team? What about that AI copilot your engineers are using to write code faster? Any one of these could be sending data to servers in who knows what location, creating transfers you haven't approved, let alone assessed.
And in the end, it all comes down to this simple truth. If you haven't mapped out your shadow IT and all those hidden API connections, you haven't truly mapped your data transfers. It's impossible. You just can't protect data if you don't even realize it's walking right out the front door. So, how do we fix this? The answer isn't a longer, more complicated checklist. It's about shifting our thinking and moving to a smarter, risk-based strategy that actually acknowledges how complex our modern tech world is. A smart strategy has to be global. It's so easy to get hyper-focused on GDPR, right? But other major regulations have totally different rules. In India, for example, consent is absolutely king. In Brazil, you might need specific authorization from their data protection authority. A one-size-fits-all approach is doomed to fail.
This is where a practical, tiered strategy comes into play. You don't need to treat every transfer the same way. For data going to a country the EU considers adequate, the effort is pretty minimal. For low-risk data using SCCs, a standard policy might be fine. But for high-risk data, you need layers of controls, a really deep TIA, strong encryption, solid contractual promises. And for transfers to really high-risk territories, honestly, the goal should probably be to avoid them altogether.
All right, let's land the plane with our final takeaway. Managing international data transfers effectively is not a one-person job. It's not even a one-department job. It is, fundamentally, a team sport. Real success here requires everyone to work together. IT has to validate the infrastructure. Security must be testing the access controls. Procurement needs to get the right clauses into contracts from day one. And the business leaders need to be at the table to balance what's practical with what's required. Everyone has a role to play.
And this really brings us to the core idea of this whole explainer. The goal isn't just to check a box that says SCC signed. The real goal is to understand your actual risks and put meaningful controls in place to limit the potential damage, to control the blast radius for when something inevitably goes wrong.
So I'm going to leave you with this one question to take back to your team. Take a hard look at your data transfer program. Are your contracts and your processes just a comfortable pillow, giving you a false sense of security? Or are they a genuine, well-packed parachute, ready to work when you actually need it most?